Site plant in Obomosho, Oyo State for value.
NTA Parliament, strengthening Nigeria's democracy.
Okay. Now the I thought I'm that now. But you know you're not for lazy. In farm. No, now old people they farm now. You hardly see young person in the farm now. And see land farm. Now old people did there now. And their mango. Without also. You don't want to carry it okay. Don't finish now. Their mango is sweet. How's it? Who was it?
News app from your Google Play Store and you're good to go. NTA News mobile app, your access to real-time information.
Incoming government tips on dialogue for national cohesion as Nigerian workers celebrate International Workers' Day.
I encourage the incoming administration to continue to respect workers' rights in dealing with socio-economic development.
Akpabio seeks presidential blessing as race for 10th National Assembly leadership intensifies.
Egyptian authority opens borders for stranded Nigerians following intervention.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss what next after the postponement of the census.
What would have been a jinx breaker for a 17-year heart, and many others since the last census was conducted in Africa's largest country in 2006, now appears to be another mirage.
Now, this is as President Muhammadu Buhari approved the indefinite postponement of the 2023 population and housing census, earlier scheduled for the 3rd of May till the 7th of May 2023.
Now, the announcement made available in a press statement by the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, indicates that the postponement became inevitable after a meeting of some members of the Federal Executive Council and President Muhammadu Buhari last Friday.
And of course, the president went ahead to note that appreciable progress had been made with the completion of the enumeration area demarcation of the country, the conduct of the first and second pre-tests, the recruitment and training of many ad hoc workers, procurement of digital personal assistance, as well as ICT infrastructure.
So this is the second time the Nigerian government would be shifting the census in 2023. Recall that the national head count was earlier scheduled for March 27, but was moved to May 3rd due to earlier postponement of the gubernatorial and the state assembly elections by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, from 11th March to 18th March to 2023.
Now, the National Population Commission, NPC, from reports, confirms the postponement is to allow for more adequate participation of the incoming administration. I'd also explained that the objective of conducting the exercise but not just for data collection, but for adequate and strategic planning, which will be useful for the incoming administration as well.
And Kingsley asked me, how has it been in these last 17 years in terms of planning and budgeting, as you rightly pointed out? You know, before now, some analysts and observers had expressed reservations with the timing of the census exercise and the just concluded general elections, claiming the two major events which require massive funding and intricate planning might be too cumbersome.
Well, just a few weeks ago, doubts were cast on the feasibility of the census exercise when the NPC suspended the training of ad hoc staff for the population count, now due to finance and logistics considerations amid other perceived inadequacies, although one should also add that there has been a rebuttal of that claim, because that claim came from one of the officials in Niger State, and the claim from the NPC headquarters in Abuja was to the effect that the official in Niger State had no authority to state what he said, and that the claims he made with respect to inadequate funding and the hacking of their systems, that those claims were not true.
All right, and while billions of naira was reportedly approved for the procurement of some software for the exercise and other monetary exigencies, the MPC has also earlier conducted a trial census in 2022 and identified workers in states and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, to confirm the preparedness level of the Commission towards the 2023 population and housing census. Now, with the indefinite postponement now of the exercise and the funds expended already, what is next? This we shall interrogate with our panel of guests on Good Morning Nigeria today. I am Kirian Umayo, welcoming you to this Tuesday's edition of the program. We're glad to have you join us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program. As always, we are live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And we are here in our headquarters studios in the nation's capital of Abuja. In the course of the program, we have our complimentary segments, and these include business and newspaper review. For now, take the highlights of the morning news, and here is Nolile Belame, our colleague, who has the news. Good morning, Nolile.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the news. Being the last Workers' Day marked under his administration, President Muhammadu Buhari is urging the incoming government to uphold concepts of decent work and adoption of social dialogue for national cohesion and improved productivity of workers. The president made the remark at the 2023 Workers' Day celebration in Abuja.
Administration to continue to respect workers' rights, imbued with socio-economic development and driven by the 4 pillars of decent work agenda to promote jobs and enterprise, guaranteeing rights at work, extending social protection, and promoting social dialogue for consensus building and maintenance of industrial relationships.
Meanwhile, the president-elect Bola Tinubu has extended his hands of friendship to the Nigerian workers through the 2 central labor unions, Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress, as Nigeria celebrates the Workers' Day. President-elect Tinubu acknowledged the day as a special day in most parts of the world to salute and honor the working people whose hard work and sweat continue to oil the wheel of human progress and advancement. In a statement that he issued personally, Tinubu promised that when sworn in as the president of the country, the workers would find him a dependable ally and a core laborer in the fight for social and economic justice for all Nigerians, including all the working people. The president-elect said his plans for better welfare and working conditions, which are clearly spelled out in his renewed hope agenda for a better Nigeria, is a covenant born of conviction and one he is prepared to keep. In other news, the immediate past Minister of Niger Delta Affairs and former Governor of Akwa Ibom State, Godswill Akpabio, has formally informed President Muhammadu Buhari of his aspiration to become the 10th Senate President. This was at an audience with the Nigerian leader at the presidential villa.
Nigeria in that capacity, and also to let him know that we'll continue to pray for him so that God will continue to sustain him as we move forward. And as the transition from him to the incoming president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that God will continue to give Nigeria peace, and through them, that progress will remain our portion in the country.
Elsewhere, the chairperson Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabre-Rewa, says Egypt has opened her borders for Nigerians. The chairperson says the development was as a result of intervention of President Muhammadu Buhari and President of Egypt Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Though not disclosed to the public, she, however, states that a stringent condition was attached to the border opening. To this end, the process of moving Nigerians from Sudan border to Aswan for airlift is in progress. In another development, the federal government has evacuated more than 1,000 Nigerians from Khartoum and are on their way to Port of Sudan. Some of the students on transit told NTA that they were moving in a convoy of 27 buses, with each bus carrying 50 to 55 Nigerians, stating that no one was left behind. The majority leader of the House of Representatives, Al-Hassan Ado-Doguwa, says amendments to tax laws by the National Assembly are meant to entrench effective taxation system for Nigeria's economic development during an engagement with the management of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, CITN, in relation to the amendment of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICAN Act. The House leader stressed that the legislature is aware of the need to ensure that enabling environment is created for implementation. Such implementation, he added, should be administratively practicable.
At the end, relevant stakeholders find that bill inconvenient to work with. Then it's like you have made no law at all.
The Nigerian Export Promotion Council, NEPC, is set to establish a cashew processing plant in Ogbomoso, Oyo State, for value chain development of the cash crop. Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, who accompanied NEPC's Executive Director, Ezra Yakusak, on an inspection tour of some cashew farms in Ogbomoso, says the move will serve as a major boost for wealth creation and employment for youth in the area.
See the farmers, interact with them, and to arrange a PPP arrangement, a public-private partnership arrangement, to set up a cashew processing plant here in Ogbomoso along with the farmers. It's not going to be 100% government. They will be part of it, they will contribute to it, and they will run it. The objective is to increase production.
That's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kirian and Kinsley after the commercial break. Please don't go away. I am Nolene Ebel Ame. Good morning.
Well, we are indeed the story about the abrupt end of that report by Alika Manachi Aroa. You are still on to Good Morning Nigeria on NTA. Next is a review of today's national dailies.
Our newspaper reviewer, Chukwudi Okolie-Ogbaja, is right here with us in the studio. Chukwudi, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning.
All right.
Good morning, Kirian.
Yeah, my brother Chukwudi, it's good to see you. I've not seen you in a while, you know.
Well, you decided to take leave. You went AWOL, away without official leave.
No. I'm working according to official schedule.
I was only pulling your leg.
Yes. Let's begin with Punch newspaper this morning. The Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate, NAD Films as Ngige condemns doctors' entitlement mentality. It's on page 41. Police, DSS, INEC, joint panel invites suspended Adamawa REC. It's on page 41. Subsidy, salary payment unlikely after June, says Obaseki. It's on page 20. Now, below the name flag, we have the lead story on the Punch newspaper. Tinubu promises tough decisions. NLC demands new retirement age with 2 riders. Labour recommends 65 years retirement age, 40-year length of service. President-elect seeks understanding, says hard decisions coming soon. Now, all that on page 2. Well, the photo story is, of course, the Labour Party's outing yesterday, and of course, the current Minister of Labour and the LP presidential candidate, exchanging pleasantries there. Now, below that, we have Sudan, Egypt opens border for stranded Nigerians on page 8. Abuja traders petition IG over shopping complex demolition. It's on page 5. Plans to scrap Kano New Emirates will fail. That's according to Ganduje, the governor of Kano State. It's on page 42. All right, Kinsley.
Okay, we also have the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint. Below the name flag, you have the kicker strike. Resident doctors demands ridiculous. That's according to Ngige. Says they have option to leave the country. No apologies for my decision in trade disputes. Tinubu on Workers' Day. Leadership will require tough and hard decisions. Assures of living wage. Tells workers, I'm ready to fight your fight. Protect entrepreneurs, grow middle class. NBA tasks Tinubu and governors-elect. Workers is society backbone. That's according to Diri. NLC, TUC vow to resist anti-workers policies. Then also there on the front page says, cancer scare. Importation of Indomie noodles remains banned. Sudan, Buhari waits in, Egypt opens border for fleeing Nigerians. Boss convenes citizens, ignites fire. 2023 UTME, makeup exam holds May 6th, that's according to JAMB. Lukman, there's APC, says Adamu and Omishore lack power to expel me. Autumn to National Assembly, reject grazing reserve bill under whatever guise. God won't allow reversal of Kano's New Emirates. That's according to Ganduje. Nigeria records 897 Lassa fever cases and 154 deaths in 3 months.
Okay, let's run through a leadership newspaper from top to bottom. Leadership newspaper from top to bottom. At Shimbajo's book launch, go on, louds current government. That's on page 6. Ethylene oxide, that's the kicker. NAFDAC takes noodle samples for investigation. It's on page 6. Other stories here. Manufacturers spend 76.7 billion naira on alternative power in 6 months. It's on page 7. Just what Kinsley read a short while ago. APC crashes Adamu or Misero-like powers to expel me. Look, man, page 7, where it is captured on leadership. Now, going further, 10th Senator Babio meets PMB over ambition. Amid dwindling revenues, Tinubu raises workers' hope for living wage. It's on page 4. Well, 4 others to that says, your fight will be my fight. We don't want broken promises. Federal government states may not pay salary from June, Obaseki warns. You can't speak for government, Labour tells Edo governor. All right. Police invite Adamawa REC who do over dramatic declarations on page 12. God won't allow anybody to tamper with Kano Emirates, according to Ganduje, page 6. Chukuli.
Thank you, Kirian. Thank you so much. The headlines you reeled out, that's between you and Kingsley, would seem to be on the side of, the Labor and Productivity Minister frowning on, the tendency by health workers and maybe tertiary academia as well, to agitate that they too not be left out of the announced pay rise. The nation, curiously, has pay rise coming for health workers, lecturers, others. Incidentally, just like what is happening to the core civil servants on the consolidated public service salary structure as the COMS. The Minister of Labour and Productivity, Dr. Chris Ngige, was obviously responding to the agitation from health workers and those I call the tertiary academia, who got unsettled over the possibility that the announced 40% pay rise would not get to them. Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. They seem to be thinking. That's the groups I'm talking about now. Well, I do not foresee a situation where anyone would leave out any segment of salary earners from the announced pay increases. A bandwagon effect simply maintains the status quo ante and reduces the incidence of labor upheaval. But how do you combat the tendency for inflation to shoot up as more money is being planned into the system? That's the question we ask ourselves. So apart from making civil servants and allied workers, those who are in the different, agencies and parastatals, apart from making them smile, you also need to think about the economics of it. Because at the end of the day, you could give a man 10,000 naira and he ends up spending 12,000 naira of the 10,000 naira. Don't tell me I'm contradicting myself. That's what inflation does.
Yeah.
So all the parties to this are supposed to be circumspect. As you ask for more money, also think about the microeconomic implications of the money coming into the system. And so that if government does put up an argument, you would be in a position to at least begin to understand or at least listen to them. My friend will say, listen to me at least. You don't have to agree with me. Because at the end of the day, dialogue carries the day for everyone.
Yeah, my major concern with respect to the increase in salary is not even, to make it a record across all agencies and departments and what have you. But these are the federal level we were talking about. What is the percentage of Nigerian workers attached to federal establishments? This kind of what's percentage?
Chris,
listen. I'm coming now. Talk about the states. The states have not been able to pay the 30% increase that we had about a few years ago. And now there's another increase. So how will the states cope? And this is where we have the majority of Nigerian workers.
So you are agreeing that the states would inevitably be pulled in.
Exactly.
I thought you were thinking that they would say, oh no, this concerns just federal workers.
No,
that's not going to happen.
It does not.
If you remember, habit.
And in the inflation aspect of it that you mentioned, it is inevitable. But the point is that the country will also have to wake up, in terms of production. Production. These are, three options: production, in all segments, in all aspects of our national life, especially agriculture, because that will be the only thing that will fight inflation. And if you don't increase people's salaries, then of course people don't have a living wage. We don't even have a living wage currently. So I mean, that's just the mix.
Yeah, salary increases have become inevitable. I agree totally. There's nothing you can do. However good your economics is as a nation, money that purchases goods and services will keep on rising. You are only slowing it. Kyrian, cast your mind back to when we were in secondary school. St. Louis sugar was 2 and 3. Remember? Is that what you buy it for now? So it's the geometric rise that people are afraid of. Otherwise, the rise in prices would keep on being an inevitable, element in overall economics, wherever you're found in the rest of the world. It's only in the US I find out that a pint of milk has been fairly steady over the decades, not just years. But then agriculture is highly subsidized over there.
We had the Udoji Award, remember those days? I mean, we were young then.
Udoji and Adebo.
Udoji
You are
Award.
grabbing some years on earth, I
yes,
dare say.
exactly, you know, and I recall my father there, you know, jubilating, you know, because you know, that sharp increase, you know, but there wasn't that much inflation, you know, when we had Udoji Award.
Yes.
Because the country was more productive then than we are today.
And agriculture was not forsaken by so many people. I think the time we're talking about, I was in good old Benin. I would always say good old Benin because one head of plantain I would buy in those days would feed me for more than 1.5 weeks. Preservation was your problem. Not the price you're going to spend, you know, for exchange for the head of plantain you're buying. I just mentioned plantain. Then frozen fish was our stock in trade. And those of us who were into, you know, having girlfriends and all that, prepared special meals then, you know. I didn't say I was one of them. I'm just telling you what happened in those days.
That's when you were Chukudi the boy.
Quickly, 1,350 more Nigerians leave Khartoum for Port Sudan en route home. They are supposed to be airlifted according to the nation. I would have thought that taking them to Port Sudan suggests travel by sea. Well, the important thing is that they come back home to relatively safer Nigeria. The Americans say war ain't good. So whatever is happening in Sudan is not going to be applauded by anyone who likes goodwill for humanity. But as Kingsley would always chip in, this tells us that those of us who are always saber rattling, jingoists and all that, war ain't good. Let us be very, very careful what we do. Sudan is particularly of concern because you can almost liken it to economic prospects that have made conflict in the DRC an interminable affair. Goma would keep on hearing the sound of guns that sound almost like that name because international interests are in DRC. Sudan gold deposits are not anything you can push aside. The Russians are probably not as engaged in Sudan now as UK, US and all that who want to prevent a possible Islamist insurgents growing there again. But remember that during the reign of Omar al-Bashir, the Russians did indeed ask for a naval base to be set up off the coast of Sudan. So it matters that we nip it in the bud before it becomes a festering international sore.
All right, Chukwudi, thank you very much. There is a public health issue. The story first broke at the weekend that in Taiwan and Malaysia, the Food and Drug Control authorities in both countries had ordered a recall of Indomie noodles. I wouldn't know whether it's noodles in particular, or in general, or whether it's Indomie noodles in particular. And this is on account of what the authorities said to be unacceptably high levels of a cancer-causing agent. Now, NAFDAC is reported here saying that importation of Indomie noodles remains banned, and that the NAFDAC is all out to ensure that such products don't get into Nigeria. I think that there's a need for further clarification. Yes, the story says that Indomie noodles importation has been banned for a number of years. Do we produce noodles in Nigeria? Do we produce noodles in Nigeria? And who are those that import noodles into the country? Is it the condiments, the spices that you add to the Indomie or the noodles preparation that you should also be on the lookout for? Because we know that an entire generation of Nigerians is sometimes jocularly referred to as the Indomie generation. It's a ready to cook and easy to cook meal for quite a number of persons, and sometimes when they mix all of these things together, you never can tell what they are mixing together. The condiments, what is it that we are doing here in our own country to be sure that the noodles being prepared, offered for sale to the public do not constitute a public health hazard. Cancer doesn't kill somebody immediately. You may not see cancer when you are consuming the various ingredients. It is the harm that it does to the body. And we have seen young persons. We have discussed cancer issues on this program. Dr. Mohammed Bello, one of the countries and Africa's leading oncologists, keeps saying, look, the numbers they are seeing of young persons, of middle-aged persons, of older persons who are coming down with all kinds of cancers. Will tell you that there are environmental factors as well as what we ingest into this. So what is the issue? Is it a general public alert with respect to noodles or with respect to the condiments? I think that NAFDAC will need to further clarify this. And then, if you say that importation of noodles remains banned, what is it that members of the public should watch out for? Because I tell you, you go to some shops, you will see something they call Singapore noodles. It's meant to be a delicacy when you are preparing your general foods and so on and so forth. Go around to some of the upscale shops and you find them. So what is it that those items are doing in our shops? And what is the precaution that members of the public should take with respect to the consumption of this readily available food?
It's a good thing you mentioned NAFDAC, Kingsley, but you see, I always give it to the news hounds. Let them always spearhead inquiry. The journalists have a job to protect public safety in this regard. We must do more, to find out. Because investigative journalism, which seems to be dying on our shores, needs to be resurrected for the sake of society.
Yeah, most news items you hear these days are basically politics all over the place. I think what Kingsley mentioned, explained is very, very apt. Because to recall, during Dora Akunyele's era in NAFDAC, there was the issue of Indomie, recall.
Yes.
And the companies that are making it, they are producing it in Nigeria anyway.
Yes.
Majority of them are produced in Nigeria, no less about that. And it's that substance is ethylene oxide, which is suspected to be in the noodle itself. Right, so Dora Akunyele investigated herself, carried out several research work and all of that, and endorsed Indomie as at that time. Now, from what Kingsley has said, some people are importing Indomie, and it has been banned. So who brings Indomie in? And the Singapore, whatever that they're doing, these are things that we were talking about in this country. People keep smuggling some items that we can make in Nigeria. There are even other companies that are into noodles these days, not just Indomie. Indomie is just one brand, There are many other brands like that. Yes. So now, if NAFDAC wants to carry out this kind of investigation, because they have a very good research center lab, to do that, to discover ethylene oxide is very simple. It won't take a long time to do that.
You mentioned Dora Akunyele. Yeah, so rest in perfect peace.
Yeah. She was fighting doggedly then. He will fight from this country to the country of origin of whatever item in question and follow it diligently and meticulously.
She looked like a harsh headmistress, but she was making a point.
All right. So good on this point. I would like to thank you for being here this morning.
Thanks a lot.
We're going to see you again tomorrow.
Always God good willing, to be in the midst of you in this pair. Thank you.
Don't mind my colleague. He's my guy any day. Okay. Well, I'll take a short break. We'll be back very.
No, what's your guy in what respect?
No.
What your guy?
Our time is up, gentlemen.
We'll be back.
I'm not in the mood to separate it.
We'll be back in a minute.
So your guy in what respect? You know, Rangers or what?
Which Rangers? Why you call up Rangers? Thank you for staying with us. And on the network service of NTA. Now, our focus today, as we earlier informed you, is the census postponement by the federal government. Now, we are asking what next? And before the conversation takes up, because of course we're going to be hosting a number of guests this morning, let's get the background information by Oyemi Ajayi.
One of the recommendations of the United Nations Population Fund is the need for countries to conduct their national census every 10 years in order to have accurate number of population. Globally, this has been adhered to by countries, with Nigeria not being an exception. Since the first census as a political entity since 1952-1953, irregular censuses have been conducted in 1962, 1973, 1991, and 2006. And this explains the level of anticipation for the initially scheduled 2023 census, 70 years after the last counting. The National Population Commission (NPC), the focal agency in charge of census in the country, remained determined to ensure that the 2023 population and housing census was done, especially with much resources spent on it. As a step, NPC kicked off with the trial census, which they said was indeed a success, keeping them with the right foot getting set for the main counting. In fact, it was said that the NPC was indeed prepared for the first ever digital census in Nigeria. About 450,000 digital gadgets were procured and distributed to all the local governments aside the successful training of about 60,000 facilitators across the country. The commission was said to have been able to mobilize Nigerians for the census with every information required for a successful census, hence achieving topmost success in all ramifications in terms of the preparation. 29th of April 2023 brought a change when the 2023 population and housing census was postponed due to the government's transition program. The census earlier scheduled from 3rd of May to 7th May and now indefinitely postponed, saying the incoming administration will have to refix a new date. Now, with the postponement of the census, what next? Especially with the amount of resources spent. What is the probability of census still being conducted this year? These are some of the questions guests already seated will be answering shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background. With us in the studios to discuss issues around the postponement, or shall we say rescheduling of the census exercise, let's welcome Ojogun Osifo, who is Director General of the National Population Commission. Mr. Osifo, we're glad to have you this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, we also have with us in the studios Professor Oka Ubono. He's a professor of sociology and member of the Presidential Population Advisory Group. Professor Ubono, good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Okay.
Yeah, gentlemen, it's indeed good to have you this morning. And of course, Mr. Sifo, you are the, the head of the operations of MPC.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, we know the rigors we've gone through all these years in preparation for 2023 census. So we understand all the field works that you put in place. And again, the recruitment of ad hoc staff and your regular staff who have been in the field working out demarcation and all of that. But what has happened recently is the fact that the President and Commander-in-Chief has postponed or rescheduled this year's 2023 census. And the question in the minds of many Nigerians will be, why the postponement? And some are saying, look, yes, even from the time it was scheduled to hold immediately after the election, some persons, raised eyebrow on the possibility of engaging such two major events in a nation at the same period of time. And here we are. Let's get your take, on the latest development.
Well, good morning, Nigerians. Census, as it is, or as it is known, is very critical for development. And I thought, as Nigerians, we look forward to it because of the pluses in undertaking a census. But when you take feelers into consideration, it turned out that there was need for it to be postponed. I think that answers it.
Yeah, yes, it does answer it, but viewers would have loved to hear more on the...
What are the feelers that you took into consideration?
Well, so that's a super question. Feelers. One, the tension generated by political tendencies of an election. If people telling people to leave certain areas and return back home to be counted, that was a very strong feeler. One of the things we abhor in a census is census migration, and that was going to be. There was this second filler that enough advocacy and sensitization has not been carried out by National Population Commission. A very strong one. Then we looked at our support partners, local and international. They were not totally coming forth with respect to funding and associated support. Well, people will say it is impossible to get to some areas, security. We consider security. Quite all right, we had what could have been mitigation plans. But when you put all these together, the tendency is to postpone. And those were the things we took up with the government, brought to their knowledge, and in their wisdom, postponement became inevitable.
Yes, Mr. Sifo. Yes, the failures that you have just enumerated that are, have affected the census adversely, that led to your concerns. A lot of money have been spent on this. You're talking about, donor agencies who did not come up with, funds for funding the census. But must every activity in Nigeria be funded by external bodies? Is it the only, in fact, every other thing you borrow for it or ask for donor? Is it what it should be? Is it obtainable elsewhere in the world? Can we do our census without looking for funds externally?
Well, let me maybe correct an impression.
Yes.
It's not only external donors we're talking about, local funders.
Okay.
You remember we held breakfast meeting for donors, both local and international. Well, but then come to think about it, donor support is part of acceptability. Donor support is part of acceptability. So it is not, in some countries obviously, census is budgeted for fully. Whether you borrow or you get internal funding. But in the case of the country, it is not that it's not funded, but we're taking it step by step, and government began to fund accordingly. Well, we knew that in 2006, about 40% of the funds came from outside. That kind of support was also expected. But it seems that the international community was not willing at this point in time for some obvious reasons. Maybe the war in Ukraine, the dwindling resources within their confines, and a host of other reasons. Thank you so much.
Okay, we appreciate you, Mr. Osifo, for your responses. And just to indicate that a third guest has joined us in the studios for today's conversation. Let's welcome Inua Bakari Jalingo. Inua Jalingo is the Director and Census Manager at the National Population Commission. Mr. Jalingo, we're glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, and good morning, Nigerians.
My next question comes to you. About a month ago, we had your good self and one of the commissioners of NPC in our studios here discussing the forthcoming census, as the timetable had indicated at the material time. In fact, it is where Mr. Osifo is seated now. That's where you sat. You expressed a great deal of optimism, along, of course, with the commissioner from NPC, about how the digital census for 2023 was going to go ahead as planned and everything was set and all of that. And despite doubts being expressed, the indication was that we were proceeding with it and publicity was going to be mounted. And then last week, it turned out that the president said, look, it didn't appear feasible to proceed with the census. What happened?
Thank you very much. The president remains the father of the nation. He has a lot of information which most of us do not have, and beyond our organizational capacity. So, and in his own wisdom and based on the advices he has received, he decided that the postponement should be done under this administration. Which is something that no one can question, and like I have said, he has the best information. And the president, since he came, and I also want to commend you, I listened to you 2 days ago or 1 day ago, where you adduced that the president is a system person. He believes in continuity, and I believe this is the main reason why he decided that, okay, let the incoming government come and also buy into the project, and it is implemented. Census is a big national project, but I can still tell you that the commission is ready for the census. We are just waiting for the bell to ring. All the systems that are required for implementation of a digital census are in place. The field functionaries we have recruited, we have them in hard and electronic copies, and which we have shared with the Federal Ministry of Finance and the Accountant General. So, and we have trained all the facilitators required. We have sent all our field materials for the training to the local government areas, except the tablets, which because of their nature and also because of we want their safety, we kept them with the CBNs in the states. So as a commission, we have followed this process methodologically as expected, as recommended by the United Nations 2020 reference on the countries to leverage on digital technology to implement the census. We have done everything that is required to implement a digital census. If you go to our office, you see that we have a dedicated call center that we can relate to Nigerians on issues and complaints about the census or information they want to seek. We have also set up all the necessary tools, the enumeration dashboard. We have the logistic dashboard in place. We have trained all the technical manpower that needs to train. We, in consultation with Federal Ministry of Finance, Federal Ministry of Education, have written to state governors to request for the classrooms, for the 20,000 classrooms we are looking for nationwide. And some states have responded on the availability of these classes. So I think the Commission has taken this census step by step. And you can see that we have also stepped up the publicity just after the election to be able to educate Nigerians on the census that we plan to implement. And one of the things that the president said in postponing the census, that the commission will be supported to continue running the activities in a manner that whenever the new president comes and his brief and a date is set, the census can be implemented. A lot of effort, a lot of resources have been put into this census, and I can tell you that we have almost done everything that we need to do. And those systems that we have set...
Okay, Mr. Bakari Jalingo, you know what you have told us this morning, my colleague just recalled all you said the other time. There seems not to be much difference, in what you told us earlier on in terms of preparation. And he was wondering as to after all these preparations and what have you, there are also glitches, that could have led to this postponement. For instance, planning properly, funding, implementation. There are key issues that we have raised here as well. We had two major events within this year. That's been the major elections that we have, and this census is scheduled to take place immediately after that. And even years before now, people have argued on the scheduling of this census. Yet the authorities allowed it to be fixed immediately after elections. So we're not talking about anymore whether you are prepared or not. You are prepared, no doubt about that. But when you don't have funds, you can't implement. That's part of it. And again, you've trained people. Those people who are trained, some of them are ad hoc staff, for instance. And if a new government comes in and says, okay, in 2 years' time, we're going to do this. And those you have trained, some of them would have changed courses, some of them would have left and do for other things, and you won't get at them again. You start retraining all over again, So our concern really, and concern of Nigerians is this. Since 2006 that we had the other census, no other Nigerian experienced census about 17 years now. And now we have planned and gotten to this level. It's been postponed. So Nigerians have said, look, okay, fine, it's postponed. When? There's no target, there's no plan. So 1 year, 6 months, 2 years. If it's left for the new coming government, we could be talking about 2 more years to come before this election. What do you think?
We are going to recommend to the government to continue the implementation of this census in year 2023. That will make it possible that Nigeria will also benefit for the 2020 round of censuses, which is going to end by this year. So everything depends on what is on the ground, and I think the government is sensitive to the fact that Nigeria is a member of the Committee of Nations. It doesn't change even there is change of government, that Nigeria is expected to provide information on the Sustainable Development Goals, that Nigeria is supposed to provide information on the 2063 African Agenda, that Nigeria is supposed to provide information to monitor our 2020-2025 Economic National Development Plan. So all these are critical things that require census data to be benchmarked, to monitor, and also to see how whether we're making progress or not. And I believe that the government in place is the government that is coming in is a government that from antecedents is sensitive to the importance of data. And I believe that they will continue with the census, having seen what we have done and also having seen what is on ground and what has been implemented for this census. Like I've said, government is a continuum, and that is what the president said. And he has always believed in that. And I will believe that by the time we make our presentation to the incoming government, and they will see a reason why to continue the census. About the funding, I cannot say that whatever governments want to do, it prioritizes and does it. And I think probably the timing of the census, coupled with the fact of the election is shifted, sort of increase and push the census period closer to the handing over note. And I think the president, in his wisdom, have decided that it's postponed till the next government comes in. And I believe that that will also be done by the grace of God.
All right. Thank you very much, Inua Jalingo, for your response. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Professor Oka Obono, you're a professor of sociology and a member of the Presidential Population Advisory Group. You will tell us shortly what the Population Advisory Group does. But with regard to the postponement of the population and housing census, is this a missed opportunity or now an opportunity for us to indeed have a credible census?
Well, it was an opportunity missed in 2016 because one of the cardinal principles of a good census is its decennial nature. In other words, a census is to be taken by countries which take censuses every 10 years. Okay. So when we took the census, I mean, the Nigerian experience has anything but, been anything but compliant with that. We had a census in '73. It was cancelled by the Gowon administration because it was an abysmal fiasco. And then we had another in 1991 under the Babangida regime, which did not command global or internal respect. And then from '91, we had the 2006 census. Okay, and now this is 2023. This is no fault of the population commissions, definitely, because basically it's a government thing. However, when the 2006 census took place, I was an international monitor of the Southeast exercise in the Southeastern state on behalf of UNFPA and the European Union. And that's what came out very profoundly across the entire country was that the technical competence of the exercise, such as in the enumeration area demarcation and all of that, was not in doubt. It was excellent, actually. But there's a different component of a census, which is the political aspect. So in fact, and indeed, in 2014, I published a paper titled Technical and Political Aspects of the 2006 Nigerian Population and Housing Census, hoping that if we were going to have a census in 2016, then the lessons derived from the 2006 exercise, would be learned. One of the very big lessons from the 2006 census is that we must never in this country contemplate holding general elections and censuses, no matter how far apart. This is in publication form. It's in the global scientific space that Nigeria must never attempt, because everybody knows, from the federal government through the Population Council to the Committee of Scholars, demographers and non-demographers, that the only two things comparable to a census in terms of the scale of mobilization and the resource required is actually general election and war. you cannot be planning anything concomitantly with a war. The whole country is in turmoil, you are mobilizing troops, you are doing everything, then you want to do immunization. You can't do things like that. You must plan. Now, if we had done that, we have not even begun to scratch the profundity of benefits that censuses have to offer us. If we think in unities, organic unities, we don't need to be registering voters when we are collecting censuses. Why? What are you registering that we don't already have? What are you registering? You see, the problem in Nigeria is that even in sense with the MPC, there are functions that belong to it rightly. If data are collected by immigration at exit points, for instance at the airports, the question you would naturally ask yourself is, people fill those forms, everybody fills those forms, and then what happens? It should be transmitted digitally to MPC so that we have an idea of net migration, so that you know how many people are coming in, how many people are going out. And then we also, because when population grows, it grows through the interaction of three vital events: births, deaths, and migration. Now, the difference between emigration and immigration is what we would call, net migration, that difference. And then the difference between births and deaths is what we would call natural increase. So when you add that difference, natural increase to net migration, you will know the volume of increase in the general population. It's really as simple as that.
Well, as simple as that, but tell us, and let's say our viewers, if there is a recognition of the political dimension to conducting a census in the same year and the same space as a general election, why did we attempt, therefore, to schedule these two major events almost within the same time belt?
Well,
as part of the Presidential Population Advisory Group.
Well, about the Population Advisory Group, it's not the Population Advisory Group that schedules where censuses are to be held. The primary advantage, the primary function of the Presidential Advisory Group, which is led, by the way, by the chairman of the Nigerian Population Commission. Okay, the Population Advisory Group, together with a larger body, which is headed by the President of the Federation, which is known as the Population Management Council, made of ministers of states and what have you, is chaired by the President of the country. And then the Population Advisory Group is chaired by the chairman of the Population Commission. So there's a seamlessness and flow of information through that chairman to the ministers in charge and to the president, and then we let these ideas known. Spectacular individuals. Actually, the body is statutorily confined to a membership no larger than 15, the Presidential Advisory Group. So there you have the technocrats. There you have the people thinking deeply about youth issues and what have you. And these are some of the proposals that have come. One of the things we are thinking about now in the Population Advisory Group is that we can choose a different model of obtaining census, which involves actually Nigerians. It's just a question of how do you take information in terms of numbers, in terms of births, in terms of deaths and what have you, at local levels, collaboratively, with MPC supervising that.
Professor Okawobono, you are really in depth, when it comes to your understanding of census from what you have postulated so far. But I want you to go further, because you mentioned the political dimension to census. And of course, we know in Nigeria, you talked about 1973, which ended in fiasco. You talked about the next one, and now the 2006. Right. But again, from 260 now, yes, we don't even know our population.
Yeah.
So the planning of whatever government that has been in power is just planned by guesswork. Because invariably, for you to have a good budgetary allocation to all the sectors of our national life, there must be census. Have to be working on a population. Okay. And what you explained to, so far shows that, look, that in some countries it's very easy to talk about population of a nation. As a matter of fact, we have been given an idea now that India will surpass China in the next couple of has done so already. So how do they do this? They didn't conduct a census, but they have a way of getting to know about it from what you have explained. Now I want to ask you this. I believe that the issue of MPC, I think it's under the purview of the Minister of Internal Affairs.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
All right. And from your experience, and from what you have even told us this morning, do you believe that we will in the next 1 year or thereabouts be able to conduct a credible census in this country, considering the political dimension, considering also the fact that in this country is where everything is politicized? For instance, when it comes to Kano must be higher than Lagos, Lagos must be higher than Kano. This must be, these things also play out, So what is your view? Because Nigerians don't even understand what census is all about. Some persons have not even heard about census, except perhaps in classes, as to know what is the relevance of census in a society and what have. So, and Nigerians are not even prepared now to be counted based on the situation in the country, economically, socially, and security-wise. Okay. Many people are not prepared to obey any order, asking them to remain at home for counting when he's not sure of a meal.
Yeah.
So how do you put all of this into context?
Yeah. It's a pleasure to note, based on my observation and my work very closely with the Nigerian Population Commission, that at the technical level, because the census, when we say census, what the public knows about census is the enumeration per se, people going from households and counting. But at the core of the census exercise, the most important function is actually invisible. That is enumeration area demarcation. They've got that down to a science. And they've got enumeration down to a science. The problem, with due respect to this federation, is the Constitution. The Constitution notoriously ties population size to resource allocation, and also bases parliamentary and political representation on the same principle of population size. This in itself is a legal incentive to overcounting one's population, especially when you have the plural ethnic dynamics of 389 ethnic groups competing for the same national resources. Unless and until that political dimension, those provisions in the Constitution that make populations, that weaponize population size in terms of this crimmage we are talking about, the natural flow is that individuals and communities, in protecting their interests, will inflate their figures. The reason, the science behind that, combining the technical and the political, whereby people like I say don't bring these two things together, is because the sensitivity of that political dimension is at its highest in the electoral cycle during the year of general elections. So when you bring in the census, the political class will weaponize that census as well. It's not rocket science. So while we keep doing this, I mean,
Professor Bono, thank you very much. I mean, Kyria, this is quite interesting. The dimension that Professor Bono is bringing in. But in terms of public policy formulation, I want to bring in again the Director General of the National Population Commission. Professor Bono has indicated the number of bodies that are, of course, involved, and there are others that are involved in the census exercise. He talked about the Presidential Population Advisory Group chaired by the chairman of the NPC. He also talked about the National Population Council headed by the president. And more importantly, there is also the Council of State. The Council of State, you have former, current and former heads of state who are members, former Chief Justice of the Federation, who are members, and one of the issues on which the president can ask the Council of State to advise it on is on census. So, how then do we reconcile this? You published a paper to draw attention to the hazard of having a coterminous general elections and population census. And yet, in our scheduling, or the scheduling by the NPC, we seem not to recognize, because 1 year ahead of time, INEC, following the revision and the reenactment of the Electoral Act, had given its timetable. And of course, we do know that by constitutional requirement, the terminus for the administration will be 29th of May, and you have to conduct elections well before then. How come all of this knowledge available in the academic circles, as well as the various bodies, were not taken into account to recognize that, look, politics could actually be a surefire tinderbox, you know, to unravel even your best intentions as a population commission?
So that's a great question, actually. You have risks and risk mitigation plans. First of all, if you recall, the census has shifted from one date to the next date to another date until the 3rd of May was finally proposed. A lot of things were taken into consideration. What were the risks? What are the mitigation plans? We are not unmindful of what he mentioned. And you realize that he talked about two great things: allocation of resources, distribution of political, number of legislators and the rest of them. Those things were not to come immediately. So the census was put in such a situation that those were not to be reckoned with. And we made it very clear in most of our programs that it is not going to be used to determine the outcomes of voting. That was one. Then second thing is like looking at the security situation of the nation at that point in time. We were going to leverage on the security provided for the for INEC work to do a census, to conduct a census. So they ran a kind of pari passu, like not totally so. You look at, he mentioned demarcation. All those things were taken into consideration. We actually demarcated this country to about 600,000 years, and we've been doing other things close to checking or mimicking a census, and they never posed a problem at that point in time. Though he was right, quite right, that issues of sensitization, the political space dwarfed the tendency to be recognized, to be heard. But we believe that, well, immediately the political tension is over, that we could step up advocacy and sensitization, which we did. Well, a census moment, a census situation can hardly be perfect. Yeah. If we move the census to next year, the tensions will remain. It now depends on the mitigation plans. If we take it for November, September, these things will continue to crop up. There will never be a day, I mean, very close by, that what you mentioned, my ethnic group, we don't want to be larger than the other ethnic group, though we are happy that we didn't put that into consideration. Ethnicity questions are not added into the census schedule. But those factors remain Nigerian, and they will continue. He said a critical thing, and actually we should work towards it. A situation where we say, okay, a state should provide a kind of revenue based on its population. Then the tendency to manipulate figures will begin to go down. But that is not to say that we had not set aside some quality measures to make sure that we have an accurate census. But be that as it may, you will understand that it is one thing to have an accurate census, it is another thing to talk about acceptability. Mm-hmm. So these are all intricacies that will continue, but we will continue working on them to see how we will mitigate on them.
Yeah, you know, I like it, you know, when you said mitigation plans, you know, which means that already you're expecting some kind of manipulations, you're expecting some fault lines, we'd want to correct, you know, along the line of trying to get an acceptable census. You know, I don't know, we Nigerianize everything. I mean, if I may use that word, in terms of our belief system, in terms of our value system, in terms of how we do things, you know. We learned even in the 60s when we had the census, some people said, look, some people were counting animals and all of that in order to come up higher in number and what have you. And growing up, I grew up to know that it was rumored then that during that census, some people were counting animals and so on and so forth. So when can we stop being Nigerian in terms of the way we think, you know? And now you were talking about acceptability. One thing is to conduct it, another is to accept it. Because of the manipulation tendencies that we've experienced in the past, and they may rear its ugly head again, because Nigerians have a way of you know, redeveloping ideas on how to manipulate the system and get things done, just like we have in elections. Now we know that elections cannot be perfect, right? And that's it, and we have to live on that. Now census is here. You're talking about the political aspect of it. You said that the Constitution notoriously, I like that word, linked population to monthly allocation and other benefits. So why would there be manipulation in census? In your consideration, is it part of what may have led, I mean part, to this postponement?
I don't think it has anything to do with it. By the grace of God, we are census practitioners. Both myself and the Director General have implemented 2 censuses.
Just for you to continue, remember that when you're planning election, people are planning to rig the election. Now you are planning census.
I'm coming. I'm going to answer your question, and I believe I will try to answer it rightly. We have practical experiences in Nigerian census, having implemented the 1991 census. By the grace of God, I coordinated the operations in the whole of Ondo and Ekiti put together. In 2006, I coordinated the operations in Imo State. Having worked in Kano Data Processing Center, Enugu Data Processing Center, and all these things, we all know the dynamics of the census. And by the grace of God, most of us that are in the helm of affairs, including the Director General, are product of these last 2 censuses. And all we have set out to achieve is to achieve a census that is of high quality, that is verifiable, and when it is implemented. And we started this process systematically from our enumeration area demarcation. You cannot invent any building that is not existing today in our enumeration plan. And part of one of the first things we did is that we focus on monitoring and evaluation and data quality assurance. We set up a 5 data quality strategy to ensure that we have an accurate and reliable census. And we have worked on it in each step we go to ensure that we have a quality census. And apart from that, technology, leveraging on technology have made things very easy. Sitting in my office, I can know the number of buildings in an EE. I can also assume the number of households. And like I've always said, census is also science. It's pure science. Demography is pure science. It's something like if a doctor sees a sick person, he will know that this person is sick by conducting one assessment. The same thing we in the demographic field, any data you bring to us about a place or anything that is sick will tell you that that data is sick is not correct. And you cannot even put that data on the table. So technically speaking, we have developed a 5 data quality strategy. We have geo-coordinates of all the buildings. What is left now is to attach the population to those buildings and to those households, and so that it can be verifiable. In the past, when you said that my place is not enumerated, sitting on a dashboard in a digital census, I will see that we have assigned an enumerator 100 houses. He has completed on day 1 20 houses. How many households he has completed? We are seeing it on the digital dashboard. We'll see that whether he can complete the exercise in this number of days. So technology and also experience and also a lot of things has provided us opportunity to implement this census in a better way and in a manner that is verifiable by Nigerians, and we believe that if it is verifiable, it is going to be acceptable. So all these issues that people are saying and all these things, we are mindful of that. And again, we have to look at the timing of the commission. Before the coming of this president, we have only demarcated 1 local government area. And all the impetus for the census was given within this regime. And within this regime, we are able to demarcate the other 772 local government areas, including Abadan, which we use hybrid methodology
before this administration,
to demarcate.
What have you been doing as MPC?
Everything as a government agency. Today, if NTA is not giving funds, it cannot even host this program. If funding is not provided for any activity, there is no way you can do it. And it is until the coming of this government that we have been given resources to even do the enumeration. Enumeration area demarcation, it requires you to go to each of the buildings, take the coordinates, every standing building, every standing structure where people live and where people don't live, every facilities. We have mapped this country. The data we have on the mapping of this country, nobody, it has even earned us an international award. So this is the enormity of the work that has been done in the commission.
So you have been underfunded since 2006, from 2006 to 2015. That's what it means.
Why the census could not be implemented? It was because of funding issue in 2016. But with the coming of this government, without the enumeration area demarcation, there's no way we can even be talking about census as we are sitting today.
Okay, yeah, all right. Inua Jalingo, thank you very much for your explanation. There are a number of issues on the table, and you can see we're discussing population census, but there are many coordinates around the subject matter. One point that I will bring back, Inua, you were here the last time we discussed this, but not immediately. And just to indicate what Professor Obono said, two issues that you raised. Kirian is fascinated by the fact that you said the constitutional notoriety of it's actually constitutional provisions relating to revenue allocation, the factors to consider. Population is one of them. Land mass is one of them. The IGR of the state itself is also another. And these are matters that are usually considered by the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission. The other has to do with constituency delimitation that takes place from time to time. And of course, even in advanced democracies, particularly in the US, you know how gerrymandering, it's a tough issue during the course of elections. So sometimes they do it, it looks like a snake because you want to cut off some population that will not be friendly to you and all that. But I want to pause you, Professor Bono, and then go back to Inua on one of the issues you raised, and this also applies to the DG of the Population Commission. On Good Morning Nigeria, we have also raised this issue that through our guests and then through, of course, the questions that we have asked them. There are too many data collection points and centers. This one will do its own collect data, the other one will do its own collect data, the other one will, and then there appears to be no coordination. You raised an important issue now about net migration and migration, and people fill forms when they are traveling out of the airport. What happens to those forms? Are you in tandem with the with immigration service? I don't know whether if you were part of the conversation. We also discussed on Good Morning Nigeria sometime in the past registration of births and deaths, which again is a function of the NPC at local government levels to say you get a birth, you register it, a death, you also register it. In some communities, though, we're told that this is just oral evidence. Some officials go around to say, encourage communities and so on and so forth. But if we are going to be truly scientific, as the case of India we have mentioned now, without conducting a census, it's overtaking China. How do we integrate these critical elements into our data collection in terms of our numbers? I don't want to say credible census.
I think if we could remember with the coming of this government, part of what they did under the office of the vice president was set up a harmonization of national data from all organizations, which NPC was sitting on that body, and a lot has been achieved in that direction. There is data sharing between NIMSI, between central bank, between immigration and all this and all that. That is why now you cannot do the things that you can do on different accounts with different names and all this. It's because of this data integration that has been taking place in government. And that is why the NIN is still the unique identifier for everybody. National Population Commission is collaborating with NIMSI as a foundation identity provider, because we register birth and also we register deaths. So, and if you see what the commission has been doing in terms of next to the census, because the census is like sort of what everybody is hearing about the activities of the National Population Commission. I think the National Population Commission has done a lot. We have digitized our birth registration system, just like any other country is doing. And if there is anything that will be able to deliver at Nigeria will meet in terms of the SDGs is the registration of births. which we have improved significantly.
Is it digitization? Is it countrywide? Because there are remote locations.
It is in each
people
of
just
the
give birth at the backyard.
in each of the local government areas of the federation, we have a digital data registration centers and so many other outlets. So people, we are doing both canvasser and in health facilities and all these things, and that has upgraded our birth registration system. And we are making advocacy on death because we know all the sociocultural factors that are affecting deaths. Similarly, there is collaborations with immigration. All these things, by the grace of God, there's a significant improvement of how things are done before and how things are done now. And all this is brought by the harmonization and by the support government is giving, and also the international agency under the World Bank is trying to support. And so we are doing a lot in that. And I believe that we have achieved a lot in terms of this registration of systems. And just to say, India has never stopped a census since 1872, despite the fact that they are having all these systems of registration in place. Census is a total different international civic responsibility. It's only small countries like Belize that probably their population is too small that they now rely 100% on birth registration system and all these things to estimate their figures. But every country, America, you can't give a birth in America without being registered, and somebody cannot die without being registered. They have been consistently holding their census. It doesn't take away that from all these census. Ghana, even at the midst of COVID, because of the importance of census, because they want to maintain that 10 years census taking history, they even went ahead within the period of COVID to conduct a census. South Africa is doing it every 5 years. We want this census culture to come to Nigeria. Nigeria cannot be a giant of Africa and is planning in the dark. As government is going now, we are supposed to have benchmarked this government. What kind of indicators have they made in terms of human development indicators, and where are they living? We can say they have performed. I was privileged to be in a dissemination of Ghana census, and every minister is called upon to sit down. If you're a minister of water resources, they'll present the country's data in terms of water resources, both the regional data and the state data and all these things. You, the minister, is held accountable. You have to explain what have you done and what did you do that this indicator is showing that there is less water supply like the last census. So everybody is held into accountable based on verifiable data. So we want Nigeria to be there. Kaduna State have started going that direction. And that is the only way we can bench our leaders and say that they have performed or they have not performed.
See, in fact, what I just said, tells us so many stories. Because Nigerians, like I was saying, you want to be like Ghana. How on earth can we be saying that we want to get to the census culture like Ghana? How did Ghana overtake us in that? I am not asking you to answer it because it's not for you to answer. Because it's just because of our own internal issues that led to all of that. Otherwise, as we say, the giant of Africa, we couldn't organize census every 10 years. Now we are 17 years, and it has just been postponed. So what happened? Right, let's bring in a prof again because of his very, very high-rated understanding of what we're talking about. Now, he mentioned a few times, my colleague also asked a barrel of questions in respect to what Mr. Jalingo tried to explain. You can also come in there, key in there, and let us know why we cannot be part of a census culture in Africa.
First of all, let me start once again to unambiguously salute the kind of work that I find is being done at the National Population Commission. The technocrats there, the technocratic culture that prevails there, if that were all that we required, I mean, they've gone through the most important element of census, like I said, which is the enumeration area demarcation, without any controversy whatsoever. That's because the political class is unaware that that's the basis of the census itself. So, left to them, we will just be taking our censuses and be proceeding. Just like hospitals keep records of patients, by the way, is the same thing. When technocrats are in charge of medical records, they keep those records, no problem. Now, the reason why I genuinely feel that the census evokes this kind of passion, a negative passion, and a tendency to overcount is simply because of the federalization of resources. Okay, the concentration of resources at that level, rather than creating a culture, a precedent culture, where these resources are generated first of all locally. So if the six geopolitical zones were the equivalent of what you might then call geo-economic zones that are actually viable and vital in the generation of their own resources, and then they are at the same time looking inwards to see how many they are in order to effectuate the distribution of those resources, including infrastructural and institutional resources, not just money sharing. You will find that the census culture that you have just talked about will descend like a shadow follows the substance. The fact that people realize that they don't have to inflate their numbers because they are collecting sharing some kind of national cake, which I think is a very unfortunate metaphor to use in describing this, because it just shows the lackadaisical attitude towards a productive culture. Once we are productive at that level, the census culture will be unproblematic, because internally people will want to know, where do we cite the number of schools, which had to reach, like we were just listening to, which had to reach places are there, for which reason we don't have enough schools for the children. Maybe now is the time to push resources in that kind of place. Census primarily is a planning tool. It's a planning tool. Now, when you see, one of the things that baffles me is when you see policies, good policies, after good policies year in, year out, and for 20 years or thereabouts, close to it, we don't have, census figures to actually track the impact of these policies. Like, we have had 3 antinatalist policies in Nigeria. The first was in February 1988, the second was in April 2004, and the most recent is 2021. Actually, the Population Advisory Group is part of the implementation structure of that population policy. Now, you expect to see impacts, which is the difference between the database as it was before the implementation of a policy and the situation now. Now, if that is the case, you cannot then be allocating the same amount of resources to that same issue that you have been tackling for the past 25 years. If you are trying to reduce the number of children women are having, for example, from 1988, then it will get to a point where you should not be building more primary schools. You should be transferring the money that will be building more primary schools, because there is a decline in fertility to the area of, services for the elderly. Okay? Services for the elderly, old age social security, which actually is what creates...
Why are you pointing at me? I'm not on
No, because I saw your sudden interest. I saw your sudden interest. so I thought I could tell you that the MPC is planning in such a way that you'll be happy. If we don't have that culture where the census lets us know, the proportion of the population that is aging is going to outstrip the younger ones in the next so years. Those are the projections we can make. People will keep having numerous children, fertility will remain high, because that is their retirement plan. The continued propaganda that this is unreasonable, what they are doing, needs to be revised. Sitting here, each one of us probably has an idea of some kind of retirement plan somewhere. Okay, there's a pension management group handling something, real estate. But in Nigeria, the majority of elderly persons are either illiterate or have never worked in such a way that they can attract a pension upon retirement. So they age in ignominy and possibly die unsung. What do you want them to do in that kind of case? A census will let us know that, we have been training our young people. That generation is not going to have numerous children. They can see the impacts of expanded program on immunization. Children are not going to die. So people are going to live longer. So we better start planning for these elderly people. Census is what arms the government to know things like that. That the direction of population increase is going to shift away from fertility to migration. To migration. The inflows as prosperity visits Nigeria, once we start getting all these things right, what do you think is going to happen to West Africa and the rest of the world? They will see Nigeria as a haven. Just like South Africa, it's going to happen. So we need to know, how do we deal with a country that grows even more complex than ethnicity? Because some racial diversities are coming into the country and the elderly are growing. If you don't take a census, your population dynamics will be changing right under your nose, and you won't have the figures, like Bill Gates will say, manage with the force of facts. You won't have the force of facts that actually encourage you to take this particular difficult steps because you are convinced that is the objective thing to do.
Okay. Professor Oka Obono and the Director General of NPC, Ojogun Osifo and Inua Jalingo, very important issues that you have raised. Nobody doubts the necessity of a census, and the arguments that you are making here would in fact provide further incentive for the incoming administration to ensure that it's able to get the census right. It's not a question of saying, oh, it was done during my time. We know the groundwork has been prepared, has been laid, and then of course you get it done, and then the facts and the data that will emanate from that, you deal with it. I think that Professor Bono will come back to you, if not today, maybe some other time. There are a number of very vital points, Kirian, that he has raised. A number of these linkages. Sometimes when we are discussing numbers, for instance, fertility rate in Nigeria is 5.5. And then population growth rate, we are told, is about 3.2, sometimes 3.3. And that unless our GDP outstrips that population growth rate, then we are not likely to deal with misery and poverty in the land. And if we are struggling with that,
and that's why you're supposed to mention all the things he explained, the last statements that he made, that linked population to development, to education, to economy, to planning. It will have people exist, it's very awesome.
Otherwise, sometimes when you hear China saying, oh, we're having an aging population, or in Europe they are having an aging population, people are now are no longer having children, or they are declining, or they are refusing to have more than one child, even when you are providing them with incentives and so on and so forth. The other issue has to do with, if you like, the subtext. Maybe the 6th alteration to the Constitution of the Federal Republic, we have to deal with the issue of population as a factor in revenue allocation. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with our very articulate and interesting guest this morning.
Well, all right, well, thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. For today, we are discussing the postponement or rescheduling of 2023 census. And we've raised a number of issues here, and I guess I've been able to tackle them. But we are still on it, and I'm also concerned now, gentlemen, about the acceptability of Nigerians. What these plans that you are putting in place. You just gave us a brief on what happened to you in 2006, where you had issues during the census that year, and then we had relative peace in the country then. Now we don't have that, and Nigerians are also not very willing. Many of them that I've spoken to are not even giving me an idea that they have understanding of what I am talking about. So how do you intend to deal with this, DG? Because now you have time to go back to begin to talk to Nigerians, because if Nigerians do not comply, with you, your conduct, or whatever implementation strategy that you have, may not yield any good result.
Well, thank you for that great question, actually. National Population Commission is not going to just sit by and wait for another date. Like the census manager mentioned, we still have a marching order to continue with the census processes. And one part of it that is very strong is advocacy and sensitization. We realize, actually, whether we like it or not, that Nigerians have not been well sensitized of the importance of census. That is a critical area that the National Population Commission is going to work on. Over the weekend, we're at work, preparing documents, working towards the development of sensitization issues and budget for it, a full-fledged budget that has to take into consideration reaching out to those local Nigerians. In 2006, we were able to conduct CAS, a kind of assessment survey of acceptability or awareness, census awareness. In it was also built the tendency for acceptability, and we were able to run that through. We have not done that for this. We only did a qualitative analysis of something, but it was not a quantitative data issue. Qualitative has its own issues and the rest of them. And I think that we'll be working with organizations such as NOA, NTA, and a host of other organizations. We also intend to go to those rural areas using even the traditional methods to talk about the importance of census. We have the National Committee being headed by the Minister of Information, but the state committees on information, that is state committees on the census, are being inaugurated. We need to take such committees to the localities, and there we talk about the importance of the census, the essence of providing accurate and acceptable information. Here, you realize also that you need to tell somebody that it doesn't necessarily matter for you to go to your village to be enumerated, because you will be captured. Whether you are within your village or outside your village, you'll be asking you your usual place of residence, where you live naturally and work. So, and the local government you come from. So you did a lot of things that seems to be unknown at this point in time will be made known. I think that will be very critical in having or talking about acceptability.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Osifo. Back to Professor Bono. Now we're talking about timing. I know that the political factor in conduct of census, you said, is more critical in a general election cycle. We're almost over and done with that now, except, of course, for the litigation arising from all of that. But we know that there are off-cycle elections, usually governorship elections, some of them coming up from November this year. And one of the arguments some persons had made, and I appreciated that argument myself, was the fact that, look, we needed to be wary of the rainy season. Rains, I mean, if you were in Abuja last night, you would have seen part of the thunderstorm that blew across. How do we navigate the off-cycle elections in terms of rescheduling of the 2023 census? If we say 2023 census, should we therefore work to ensure that the census is conducted this year, by which time a number of the political issues probably would have attenuated in terms of their intensity or in terms of their corrosive effect?
Good. Thank you. And let me quickly add to what the DG said. This will be a census, in addition to being a digital census, that is adopting the hybrid approach. Because before now, all countries in Africa with a British colonial heritage use the approach known as the de facto method, in which case the enumerator must see you physically and then enumerate you. Even if you have always lived here, but that day you just went somewhere, you cannot be enumerated. That is, all Anglophone countries do that. Then Francophone and Lusophone countries use the de jure method, where they register you according to where you usually reside. But from what the DG has said, we can see that it's a combination of that, and they know very well how to, separate the two things. Now, having said that, your question about rains and the climate is actually an advantage. Okay, you just need to supply them with kit that keeps the paper components of what they are using and the hardware dry, and then boots for the marshy areas, and then perhaps raincoat. Why? Because nature then conspires with the National Population commission to actually keep people at home. So you don't have the additional burden of repeat visits when people are in the farms, you know, and then you have to wait because people will sneak out to the farms even when you say they should stay at home if they need food. The rains actually, in my mind, should not appear to be an enemy to the census. In a way, if you look at it proactively, is something. So from what we've heard from the MPC directly, I think that it's just an administrative decision now that is keeping them from, and I think maybe as a matter of courtesy from the outgoing president, that if there's any backlash or fallout or feedback from the census, who knows, let the incoming president be the one who actually conducted it, as it were. Government is a continuity and continuum. He handed over the baton to, rather than handing over, you know, a mess or something like that, which we do not foresee. The digitalization is supposed to help take care of those kinds of elements. And I think Nigerians should be encouraged, rather than that Afro-pessimism that always makes us think that what we do indigenously, you know, will not work. I think sometimes the power of the mind encourages action, social action, when people actually believe that a lot of investment, not just of money, but people's talents and time have gone into this process, and it's not something they spent a week planning. They've actually, it's the same thing, sir, that you mentioned about INEC, you know, which is staggered calendar. It's the same thing with MPC, with the enumeration area demarcation. There had to have been that plan that by this time this would have been done, and so on. This is just the public interactive phase of it. So personally, as an observer and part of the process, I'm optimistic. I mean, this is like sticking out my neck. It's not about the technical elements. Those are not what worry me. What worry me is, e.g., respondent fatigue. And it's not MPC alone that we do. The National Orientation Agency can be brought on board, Ministry of Information, those who specialize in spreading, NTA, who specialize in disseminating information. Once that's MTN2 and the rest of the telecommunication companies, and we'll be fine.
Yes, and well, I would also suggest that also use all these GSM operators as well, you know, and then local town criers, you know, like could they get down to the grassroots and so on and so forth. But you are going to pay for this consultancy. Well, I'm just giving
so that's where we're going.
Yeah, right. Now,
it belongs to the committee already, publicity committee.
Okay, now, Mr. Jalingo, what is the implication of this postponement in terms of a loss of resources, also in terms of a loss of ad hoc staff that you have trained? As I mentioned earlier, some of the ad hoc staff, some may move away from Nigeria, some may travel, some may, you know, engage themselves in other activities that may not allow them to partake in the census when the new date is fixed. So what are you losing, you know?
Yeah, thank you very much. We have, like, since last week, I can tell you, we've been working, including our chairman, up to sometimes 12 midnight, even yesterday. You know, we are trying to take what are we going to do, what strategy are we going to adopt. And again, government even told us to come up with whatever we think that can keep the wheel of the census moving, so that they can fund it and ensure that the census process, what we have achieved is sustained. Yes. And that I think we have done yesterday. So to come to that, most of the things that we have done to the census, as I'm talking to you now, everything that we required for the local operations of the census are in the local government areas of this country, in the 774 local government areas. The only thing that we did not take to the local government is our PDAs. And for security reasons, for every reason, we left them in the CBN. And even in our operational plan, we're supposed to take them immediately when the training is going to start, because of their value and cost, and also the need to safeguard them. And I think these things are safe. All the systems that we have set up for the census are the same system. Normally, you need to lock up this system not less than 6 months before the implementation of the census, because you are not supposed to add anything into the system when it is about 6 months to the census. So we are good to go on all these systems. We have already procured all the SIM cards that we are going to use to transmit data. We have also procured the data from the telecoms based on the assessment we did. So all these things are things that are not going to be wasted because they are not effective. They are 1 year. On the date of effectiveness, if you put them to life, they will last 1 year. Both the data and the SIM card and all this. So we have all these.
So, invariably, it's imperative that we conduct the census in 2023.
Yes.
All right. So by December 31st, 2023, we should be sure that we have done the census exercise, which means after May 29th, you go NPC and all the other important bodies, you go brief the president who's been sworn in and get his buy-in and then schedule the census for that period. In the meantime, of course, you carry on with your publicity, your advocacy, enlightenment, and all the other matters that you need to handle. On which note, we'd like to thank our three guests for their illuminating contributions to our discussion this morning. Inua Bakari Jalingo, Director and Census Manager at the National Population Commission. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Ojogun Osifo, Director General of the Population Commission. We appreciate you being our guest this morning. And Professor of Sociology and Ethnodemography and a member Presidential Population Advisory Group, Professor Oka Obono. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.
All right.
A United Nations Security Council committee has agreed to allow the Taliban's interim foreign minister, Malwami Amir Khan Mutaki, to travel to Pakistan from Afghanistan to meet with Pakistani and Chinese counterparts. Media reports say Pakistan's UN mission requested an exemption for Mutaki to travel between May 6 and 9 for a meeting with the foreign ministers in Pakistan and China. Mutaki has long been subjected to a travel ban, asset freeze and arms embargo under UN Security Council sanctions. The UN Security Council committee agreed to allow Mutaki to travel to Uzbekistan last month for a meeting of the foreign ministers of neighboring countries of Afghanistan to discuss urgent peace, security and stability matters. Now, elsewhere, Kenya's opposition leader Raila Odinga has maintained calls for Tuesday's national protest over the high cost of living, citing government's unwillingness and lack of good faith in holding the talks to address its main issues. Odinga and top leadership in the Azimio coalition have pledged to resume weekly protests despite the recent move by the government to hold bipartisan talks in parliament to address its main issues and include a reform towards the electoral body and opening of the election service to ascertain vote validity. The former premier, Raila Odinga, also cautioned the president against gagging the opposition during protest, further accusing the police of being bipartisan when they exercise their rights through demonstrations. The government, on the other hand, had warned the opposition against demonstrations, with President Ruto asking Azimio coalition to avoid violence and destruction of property, urging the rider-led team to embrace bipartisan talks in parliament. President Ruto also reminded the opposition that it was his duty as the head of the government to protect the rights and property of all Kenyans, warning that he would not allow protests in the city center.
So that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We appreciate your tuning in. Tomorrow is another day, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirian Umaya. Do have a great day. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Information is power. Every